There's something that nobody ever really talks about properly regarding Virgo. Not because it's a secret, but because it's hard to see when you're inside it. Everyone thinks they know what a Virgo is like: detail-oriented, demanding, perfectionist. And you know what's even more interesting? Virgos themselves believe this too. But there's something no one has talked about, a layer that lies beneath everything you've ever heard, beneath everything you've ever said about yourself. And when it appears, you don't feel like arguing. You feel that recognition that hurts a little. That I never had the words for this, but that's exactly what it was. Because Virgo's perfectionism wasn't born from vanity. It wasn't born from arrogance. It wasn't born from a desire to be better than others. It was born from something much older and much more human than any astrological cliché you've ever heard. This video won't confirm what you think you know about Virgo. He will reveal what has been hidden for a long time, the invisible mechanism that operates beneath the analysis, beneath the demands, beneath the control. The thing that Virgo built without realizing it is that when you understand where it came from, it completely changes how you see yourself. Stay, because what comes next is the part no one told you about. Because there's one thing Virgo does with a skill few signs can imitate. They process, they analyze, they anticipate, they read what wasn't said, hear what wasn't spoken, perceive the change in tone before the sentence is finished. They notice when something is wrong in a room before anyone has moved. This is a level of emotional and perceptive intelligence that people around Virgo rarely understand, and that Virgo themselves rarely recognize as intelligence. They call it anxiety, they call it neurosis, they call it "I'm complicated." Sometimes they call it oversensitivity, as if feeling too much were a problem and not an ability. No. This isn't a complication. This is a system, a very sophisticated system built over time to do just one thing: protect. The mind of Virgo is like a laboratory that never closes. It processes samples even in the dead of night. It recalculates even after the results have been delivered. It examines yesterday's conversation not out of obsession, but because something small, almost imperceptible, got stuck there. And it needs to understand what it was. Not because it doesn't trust, but because some part of it has learned that trusting without verifying has a price. And that price, it has already paid before. And here begins the part that nobody told you about. This laboratory wasn't built on a whim, it was built in response. At some point, probably too early, Virgo learned that chaos arrives without warning. That things can fall apart even when you've done everything right. That you can be careful, attentive, present, and still be surprised by something that wasn't in the calculations. And that the pain of it, when it happens, doesn't give any warning. So she began to analyze, to predict, to prepare for scenarios that might never exist, but that she needed to know in advance so as not to be caught off guard. And it worked. The system worked so well that she continued building, adding layers, refining the variables, covering every possible angle. But there's one thing that no control system can do: rest. And this is where you need to stop for a second and ask yourself, when was the last time you truly rested? Not your body, your mind. That part of Virgo that never stops monitoring, reviewing, anticipating the next step before finishing the current one. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path, that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. It's not a book about astrology in the way you might expect. It's a tool to develop what Virgo needs most and least allows itself: real clarity. Not the clarity of someone who has analyzed all the data, but the clarity of someone who has finally looked in the right direction. The book works precisely on this point, that inner place where Virgo knows what is true, but gets lost in layers of self-criticism before being able to trust it. You are now in this space, still processing, still recognizing something that perhaps never had words, and it is precisely in this state that this material makes the most sense. Not after you resolve the discomfort, now, while it is still alive within you, because it is at this point that reading ceases to be information and becomes recognition. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, is there any area of your life where you feel you can never finish, as if there's always one more thing to fix before you can rest? I want to understand how this manifests in your life. And the honest answer, when it comes, usually stings a little, because Virgo isn't tired of doing. She's tired of monitoring. There's a huge difference between those two things, and it's a difference that changes everything. Doing is visible. You can measure it, deliver it, cross it off the list, but monitoring happens underneath. It's the constant state of alert that runs in the background while you do everything else. It's checking if the person got angry about what you said. It's mentally replaying yesterday's conversation at 2 in the morning. It's feeling like you could have done better even when everyone around you is satisfied. This monitoring doesn't show up on your resume. It doesn't show up in your deliverables. But it shows up in your body, in the tension in your shoulder that won't go away, in the sleep that isn't completely deep, in the feeling that you're never fully present, because a part of you is always somewhere else, anticipating. There's a detail about the Virgo system that's almost cruel in its internal logic. It was originally designed to protect it from errors, but over time, it was recalibrated for a different function, to find errors wherever they may be. And a system calibrated to find flaws will find one. Always, even when there aren't any, including you. This is where things get serious, because Virgo applies that same surgical gaze, that gaze that identifies what's wrong, what can be improved, what's still missing, to itself. It's different from a work report. You can't just hand in a corrected version of yourself and close the file. The Virgo archive never closes. And then comes the question that sticks in your chest. If you're so good at seeing what's wrong in other places, why is it so hard to see what's right in yourself? That weight you're feeling right now, that feeling of never being able to simply stop, has a name. And there's a way out that isn't stop being a Virgo. It's much more subtle than that. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose, works precisely on that layer, the one where Virgo learns to use their analytical capacity as an ally, not as a judge, where discernment ceases to be self-criticism and begins to be real self-knowledge. If you're at this point now, this is the time to act, not to wait. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. So let's get to the bottom of this. There is a paradox in the heart of Virgo that is simultaneously what causes the most suffering and what contains the most power. And it works like this. The more Virgo hones her analytical skills, and she constantly hones them throughout her life, the more capable she becomes of identifying nuances that others simply don't see. She perceives inconsistencies before they become problems. She senses the crack before the wall collapses. She reads the subtext while others are still processing the text. This is extraordinary. It's a form of intelligence that the world underestimates because it doesn't fit into a simple box. But then comes the paradox. This same system, fine-tuned to find what is out of place, doesn't have a way to switch off when it turns inward. And when it returns to Virgo, it does what it was trained to do. It finds what's missing. It points out what could be better. It calculates the distance between where it is and where it should be. And the distance never disappears. Because the system always finds something more. Virgos spend years developing an extraordinary intelligence to see what is wrong. But no one, not astrology, not psychology, not even those closest to them, usually teaches them how to use that same intelligence to see what is right, what has already been built, what has already been overcome, what is already silently extraordinary, and this absence has a very specific cost. The cost is the feeling of never being ready, of never being able to do something else, of thinking that maybe, if she fixes this one detail, then she'll be able to breathe. But the detail is never the last thing on your mind. That feeling of never being ready, it's not a character flaw. It's the result of a system that has never been taught to recognize enough. And there is a way to calibrate that. The digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, doesn't offer ready-made answers. It provides the map for Virgo to find their own. That kind of clarity that doesn't come from more analysis, but from a perspective that finally includes you as an object of care, not just evaluation. Don't let this window close. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And this is where the part that someone hid from you begins, not out of malice, but because it's the hardest part to see from the outside, and the hardest to believe when it comes from the inside. What has been hidden is not a cosmic secret. It is something much simpler, and for that very reason, more disturbing. What has been hidden from Virgo is that the very system she uses to see what is wrong is a level of perception that most people will never develop. It's not paranoia, it's discernment. It's not a requirement, it's a high standard. It's not anxiety, it's intelligent anticipation that without proper direction just spins in a void. Think of a precision surgical instrument, a scalpel. In the right hand, in the right context, it can do what no other tool can. But if you spend your life using a scalpel to try and tighten screws, it's not the instrument's fault. The fault is that no one showed you what it's really capable of. Virgo spent her life using an extraordinary instrument in the wrong place, turned inward without compassion, turned towards her own mistakes without the same analytical rigor she applies to understanding the mistakes of others. Because for others, she can create context, consider circumstances, and offer doubt. For herself, the verdict is immediate. This is not consistent. This is a system that has never learned to include the Virgin Mary as an object of care. But there's one thing this system proves, and almost no one realizes it. To maintain such a constant level of analysis for so long, on so many things at once, requires a cognitive and emotional capacity that is simply not common. What Virgo experiences as heaviness is, at the same time, evidence of a mind that functions at a frequency that most people cannot reach. The instrument is extraordinary. He just needed to be pointed to the right place. Redirecting this instrument, shifting from self-criticism to self-discernment, is precisely the work that the digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, proposes for Virgo. Not as theory, but as real practice, applied to the specific nature of this sign, to the way Virgo processes, feels, builds, and gets lost. If you've made it this far, you already know there's something inside you that needs direction, not correction. This book is the starting point. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And the strangest thing of all is that Virgo has done this before. She has redirected. She has healed. She has recovered from things that at the time seemed impossible to survive. But she did it alone, silently, without telling anyone. There's one thing Virgo does that few signs can. It processes pain in private and emerges from the other side without those around realizing how much it cost. It doesn't dramatize. It doesn't proclaim. It doesn't demand recognition. It's simply move on. And in moving on, It transforms in a way that seems invisible on the outside, but that has absolutely changed everything on the inside. One version of itself is left behind without ceremony, without announcement, without formal farewell. And the next version begins without anyone noticing the transition. Imagine a plant growing toward the light. It doesn't decide to grow. It doesn't plan the angle. It simply responds to what is available, millimeter by millimeter, day after day, until one day someone looks and realizes it's completely different from where it started. This is how a virgin grows, from within, before awareness, before recognition, before any external validation. And the tragedy isn't that she grows up like this. The tragedy is that she rarely stops to realize how much she has already grown. Because Virgo's inventory is always prospective, looking at what's missing, at what still needs to be done, at what hasn't yet reached the level she considers acceptable, looking back at what has already been accomplished, at what has already been overcome. That look almost never happens. Because Virgo's internal monitoring system, this laboratory that never closes, is always looking ahead, at what's missing, at what still needs to be corrected. And while it looks ahead, it doesn't see back. It doesn't record how much ground has already been covered. It doesn't take inventory of what has been overcome, what has been healed, what has been built silently without anyone noticing. If you could look back now at the version of yourself from 5 years ago and clearly see what has changed, you would recognize a person who has undergone transformations that the old version never imagined it would survive. Conversations that seemed impossible, situations that seemed definitive, losses that seemed to be the end of something fundamental. And he did. You did it. No manual. No therapy at every stage. No one told you it was happening. That's Virgo. That silent, almost stubborn ability to keep transforming, even without permission, even without an audience, even without recognition. It's one of the rarest forces that exist, and it's been hidden for a long time, even from you. And so we come to what has been hidden from you for a long time. It wasn't hidden through conspiracy. It wasn't malicious. It was hidden because it's difficult to see from the outside, and because within Virgo, the noise of self-criticism is often too loud for the simplest truth to be heard. The truth is this: you're not too much, you're not too complicated, you're not too demanding. You are someone who has developed over the years a level of perception that the world rarely knows how to name. A level of attention to detail that makes a real difference in the lives around you, even if no one announces it. An ability to identify what is wrong that, when redirected, becomes an extraordinary capacity to identify what can be transformed. The laboratory within you is not a burden. It's a structure, and structures don't need to be destroyed. They need to be inhabited with greater awareness. What was hidden from you isn't a secret someone intentionally kept. It's the part of your story that the inner noise wouldn't stop hearing, the part that says you are already enough to do what needs to be done. You already have what you need to begin, not after correcting one more thing, now. If Virgo carries within its core something that few people can sustain, the willingness to go deep, to not be content with the surface, to seek what is real beneath what is apparent. This, when directed inward with compassion rather than judgment, is not a weakness. That's exactly where genius begins. And she was always there, waiting for you to stop looking for what was wrong, to finally see what was right.